Hey guys, this is Brian, and today I wanted to do something a little different, a different type of format. And it's kind of inspired by Michael Martin, who's the author of The Inner Voice of Trading, which is a book I really recommend. He has a website called Martin Chronicle where he has these like mini podcasts that are just all audio, 10 or 20 minutes, where he just kind of talks about something that's on his mind, just very casually. And I find it really enjoyable to listen to personally. And at times, I feel like I have little things I wanted to say that I may not be able to contextualize on Twitter. And it's just easier when I can just speak my mind and let it go. Um, Shout out to him. I'm not paid by him or anything like that. I just really like it. Hope you guys check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. And yeah, so today, the thing that I kind of want to talk about, my little mini sode, is going to be about kind of talking about control over randomness, and how edge kind of like how pros kind of look at things, both as a trader and as a former competitive pro gamer. I still play a number of pro games to this date, and I kind of learned a lot of things along the way that I just wish I knew earlier. Kind of like if I was a trader before, if I had this trading mindset, I would have looked at games totally different. But I know there were some things I did right, and I just want to highlight those so that you guys can either learn from it or just kind of adapt that mindset a little earlier. Because I think that mindset carries you a lot further just because it kind of, intermingles with every single day type of experiences. And it's something that you can just keep helping yourself push forward and view things in a different way. Whereas when you are very single minded, like when anything's competitive, when there's a winner and there's a loser, people get really frustrated because winning is green, winning is having P&L. Uh, Losing is failure. Losing means you suck. And that's simply not true because in anything, like most things, there's an element of randomness to it. And ultimately, the best way, in my opinion, to approach these things is to assume as much responsibility as possible, how, how much you can control, how prepared you are, how you view failure, how you even view success. So, in my opinion, even if you win, even if you go green on something, if you executed poorly, if you didn't trust your rules, your plan, I consider that a failure. And I consider that something to be reviewed. And I don't feel good about it. And vice versa, when I am red, but I executed really well and I could see the broader picture. Now, I don't always see it in the moment. Like sometimes I'm really kind of pissed off and ranting about it to my friends during the day because I feel like I got screwed over, like getting top ticked or something like this. But one of the things that I do is I come back at the end of the day and then I'll screenshot what actually occurred, see the big picture. And a lot of times it was all in my head, or I did something wrong in terms of like being too tight with my stop or something like this. And I come with it with a lot more objectivity. And even if I did max out on the ticker or had a really kind of red day, like if it was unavoidable, if it was the outcome, if I did the best I could, then there's nothing really for me to kind of kick myself over. I just have to learn from it. And I think that mindset is really, really important because like when I started competing in professional gaming, like my idea was similar to a lot of traders. Like I wanted to win every time. And I actually did that. Like I pulled together a bunch of underdogs because I didn't really know many pro players at the time. And because we don't have the skill, like I didn't have a Michael Jordan or a Kobe, I couldn't just pass it to someone when they need them to clutch and let them just use their abilities to kind of run rampant and win the game for us. Like I couldn't do that. I don't have that option. So for me, it was all strategy and creating strategies ahead of time and thinking them through really meticulously ended up being like one of our greatest strengths as a team because even though we were objectively were skilled than an opponent, we were much more prepared than them. Everyone practiced the same thing, so we knew what to do. We had basically had like two strategies that we would just cycle between, and they were just so well oiled that everyone, like, instead of having to focus on like the micro decisions everyone's making, like I could focus on the macro and help everyone execute the idea. And as a trader, the beauty of it is you're on your own. Like you're your own leader, leader of your team. You are the business owner. Like you are the one who makes the decisions, and you have to come in with a strategy. I think like that strategy is what allows you to create edge. And you know, winning 100% of the time sounds great, but I think it really set me for like a very unrealistic expectation of how things should go. And as a trader, I've matured a lot more in how to view like things that are competitive, because it is, there are so many things that can happen, like one of the things that used to happen to me a lot once we started kind of like, if you run the same strategy over and over again, and we won 40 plus competitive games in a row, like 100%, versus tier one teams. So when you do that, like eventually people start figuring it out, and they start kind of reacting to things you're doing. Um, what I that's when like your edge kind of diminishes, but like it's still there. And I started making like micro adjustments back, and that caused kind of like a ripple effect, or like a butterfly effect, where every little thing threw off like what somebody knew they needed to do. They needed more instruction. I didn't have much as much thought into it. I didn't put as much effort into it as previously. And that really like snowballed into itself. And that's a whole nother story. But I just want to say that like strategy is there to provide edge for you, much like a casino. And coming into trading, you kind of have to look at it like, what is my plan? Where am I going to get out? Where am I going to take profits? How am I going to react if I get slipped or some random event happens? What are all these elements that I need to plan ahead of time? And those are things that are really going to keep you safe and sane, and help you measure like your performance. Like that is ultimately the thing that matters the most. Like, just for example, any competitive game you play, like if it's a team-based game, and I play a lot of them, I play like tactical shooter games like 5v5. The game I used to play, Dota, was a 5v5 game, so you have four of the teammates, and you're always communicating with them. Like if you want to kind of like grind the leaderboards and like play, by yourself, and like see how good you can be, like you're gonna play with completely random people, and like anyone can just have a bad day. Like you could be on fire, like you can be doing everything right, and like one person can just give up and start, stop playing the game, run down the lane and like feed the enemy team, which means like they just suiciding to the enemy team and like giving them more resources, or like they just give up entirely on the game. And that happens a lot. And so like as a pro player, someone who's like aspiring to be a professional, it's very frustrating when you have like an idea of something you want to practice in the game, but like you lose it just for no reason, absolutely no reason, because someone's having a temper tantrum. And that happens a lot in the markets too, where you can have a great plan, you can have a great risk level, but any one thing can kind of throw you off balance or like knock you out of the trade. So many random factors. And so like, how does a competitive player view these like matchmaking, like grinding leaderboard situations? They're viewing it like they're practicing something. So they go into the game with like an idea of what they want to do. So I'll go into a game, pick a specific character. I'll kind of plan out like what I want to accomplish, what I want to practice. And so whenever I go into a game, I have a plan. And so regardless or not whether I win or, play the game like uh, to the end and win, I still learn something, which means like I'm ultimately growing. So I don't feel like I'm ever necessarily like losing. It's frustrating, but I'm always getting better and better. And I can like look at the game and kind of like under a microscope, just more inward, because like at the end of the day, when you're playing or when you're trading, your performance is going to roll over into like the next kind of next round, like the next trade, the next game. And it doesn't really matter what happens in this one particular moment. It matters how you've grown over time to kind of like compound that in the end. And that's how pro players like master something. And when all the stars align, like and you have something down, like it just feels so good. And that's also the right way to kind of approach situations because not only did you perform, but it also worked. And so you can kind of like assess yourself on that versus if you're trying to kind of like react too much, it's really hard to judge what you did wrong or right. And a lot of times it can be wrong because you weren't consciously deciding that like that's what you want to do, like planning out how you're going to attack the situation. And so in general, I think it's good to have this mindset where you're really just single-mindedly focused on your performance. And over time, that's what gets people to the top. Like that's how most professionals achieve success and how they differentiate themselves from the rest of the people because most people are actually just amateurs and they look at the situation like I need to win everything. If I lose, I feel bad. I don't have a plan, but I'm going to just see what happens and if I win like I'm a god and if I lose then like I blame someone else. You need to kind of assume that blame for yourself and win or lose, identify like how you performed to your standard because you can be a winner when you lose and you can be a real loser when you win. And my motto, something that I always remind myself is like if you if you do your best, then there's nothing to regret. Well, how do you know if you're doing your best? Like how do you quantify like I did my best here because like your best needs to be measured against something. If you can't really measure it, then like what are you basing it off of? And if you're getting like all these random elements on top of, every particular instance is going to be slightly different. Like the participants, the the outcomes, and like if you let that randomness dictate how you feel about a situation, then you're not going to get accurate, tells about what you need to improve on. And that's something that's like kind of worrying for me. Like when I view other people who kind of like blame everyone else for why they're not doing well. And a lot of those people just cyclically stay where they are because they are not like always thinking about how they're going to improve themselves. So luckily in trading, again, you're your only person. So you're the only reason why you fail mostly. And there's no failing if you are always learning, as long as you stay in the game. I want people to recognize like out of all the things to talk about, like risking a small percentage of your account is how you're gonna stay in the game. And I've seen kind of misinformation about like growing and the latest tweet I did about it, I'm recording this on March 12th, so you can go back, is about humility and sizing up and kind of viewing like this as a journey rather than getting to the end goal. And I think a couple people took some pretty big losses, but because they're trying to grow too soon. And so that's kind of a side note, just popped in my mind. Um, but I think ultimately, like whenever you come in with a plan and you do your best, you have nothing to regret. Like you can have the satisfaction of a job well done. Like the day is won, and if it's not, you just learn from it. Um, I think that this is good enough for today. I did a couple takes where I just like kept ranting and like it just went nowhere. So um, occasionally I might just pop one of these in there based on what's going on. And thanks for listening, guys. All the links in the description, and have a good weekend.